So the most important question here is, what does it mean to build a Ruby on Rails application? What are the different components? The different components are the model, the view, and the controller, or is commonly known MVC. And this is the architecture, essentially the most important idea in the Ruby on Rails framework. Everything we build in some way or another will be related to the MVC. So when we build our applications, keep this in mind. It will help you organize your thoughts much better. So instead of giving you a technical definition of what it is, let's use a real-world example that we can all relate to. So you've had a very long day, you want a cup of coffee, you walk into your local Starbucks. You're the customer here. So you're greeted by a friendly barista. The barista takes your order, large cappuccino, and I want you to think of the barista here as the controller, the drinks controller. The thing we're manipulating here, the most important thing that happens at Starbucks is drinks. It's the object that is being requested, that is being dealt with. And the barista is the controller, the drinks controller. So the barista here knows it's a coffee-based drink. The model is a drink. It's the object that we're working with. And in Rails convention, it's a singular noun, capital letter, drink. And there are many instances of drink. This is actually a very important idea, is that although drink is the model, there are many instances. There are many kinds of drink that you can get at a Starbucks. So each drink has ingredients, name, recipe, and all of this information is being stored in a database. A database is something we'll be revisiting over and over again as we're building our Rails applications. And there's always, or at least sometimes, overlap between different drinks. Some tend to have the same ingredients. So the recipe, or the barista I should say, presents the coffee to you, makes it, and then brings it to you. This is the view that you get. It's a beautiful cup of coffee. Now notice here, this is actually quite important. The view is the cup. It's how it's being rendered to you, the template. It's not a bucket or a plate. The reason some apps look the way they do is because that is their view, that is their template. They're optimized, designed to produce a certain view for their users. Now the barista here is the person in the middle, the controller that interacts with both the view and the model to deliver what you want as a user or the end user. The view is only responsible for presentation. And this is, so what I mean by presentation is our style sheets, our templates, and we'll be working with this as we build our application. Model is where logic or heavy duty processing happens. If you notice here with our drink model, most of making the drink or manipulating our model, where the business logic happens, most of the code is being written around the model, not in our view, for example. So let's use a real world example here of an application that you might use. So Goodreads is where you can go research books, look it up, read reviews, things of that nature. So you'd think that there's a browser, you visit, you request something, and all the code is being essentially processed on one page, and it's pulling information or data from a database. You'd think this is the case, but it's not. What we mean by building an application here is, at least in the case of Ruby or Ruby on Rails, is you, user on a browser, and you request something. You go to a subdirectory, you click on a button, and then the router sees what route you're on, controls or interacts with the controller, and there's always a defined method or an action that relates to the request you've made. So the controller that we saw earlier was the barista, and because we're talking about Goodreads, the controller would be books, the books controller, because we're working with the book model. The book is what we're manipulating, we're processing, we're interacting with. It's the object of the application, at least in the case of Goodreads. And all this information is being stored in the database. And this information that you requested and is now being sent to you, has been fetched from the database, and it's being presented on the view, and obviously sent back to you, the user. So a few distinctions to make here. The controller only handles decisions, model only handles data, and the view only handles presentation. This is beautiful organization. As we build our application, we'll be working with these three different components over and over again, so you will get a very good handle of it. And this is, again, let's go back to that Goodreads example. So you go to Goodreads/books, assuming this directory exists. There's an action for it in the controller that is in the books controller, I should say. And then there's a book model which interacts with the database. All that information, each book is being stored in the database. Think of a table with rows of title, author, picture, reviews. All that information is stored, and now it's being sent back to you using an instance variable. So at books, which again you don't need to understand now, but we'll be visiting again and again, and it's displayed to you on the view for the user. So just a quick summary here: clear separation. So we'll be building the Rails application in parts, which you'll get very familiar with. The model, which is the active record, handles relationships. Most of the logic happens in the model. The view is responsible for presentation. And we'll be looking at two different forms of presentation here. The ERB, which is embedded Ruby, Ruby embedded in HTML, and HAML, which is another form that we'll also be visiting again and again. And the controller here is the action controller. It controls what views to use and how to interact with the model using instance variables. We'll be using and defining different methods over and over again as we build our applications. I also want to remind you here that the view is action view, controller is action controller, but model is active record, not action record. Slight difference.